All right, hi guys. I'm Fyurious. Welcome to the Fyuri.
I am Fyuri Bucklan. You can see me in the top left there, looking rather disoriented. I am involved mainly with the lore and gameplay departments of the production of Struggle for Gara.
I'm Fyuri Dyno. I'm in the top right section. I do some lore and some gameplay too.
I'm Fyuri Mekkx. There I am in the bottom left. I do a lot of gameplay and a little bit of finance. Just kind of also on the game, obviously. But yeah.
And I'm Fyuri Hoops, bottom right, and I'm the developer. I'm the programming for the project.
So, Anyway, today what we're going to be talking about a little bit is a fitting introduction to the Fyurious podcast, we believe, is we're going to talk a little bit about card games overall. We've prepared some things to talk about, and we think, should we just get into this, I suppose?
Yeah,
let's just jump in.
So.
Yeah, let's go. So, the first question we got to ask ourselves, not ask ourselves, we all know the answer, but we should talk about what are TCGs,
I don't think I've ever actually thought of what a good definition for a TCG is, though.
Well, let's start simple. TCG, trading card game. Boom.
That's not necessarily always true, because you got games like Hearthstone. Would you count Hearthstone as a TCG? But there's no trading.
There's no trading, yeah. Okay.
Trading card games have kind of taken on their own meaning, I suppose. It doesn't necessarily have to be trading.
All right, play monsters, kill things.
I think it would fall under collectible card game, actually.
Okay,
CCG.
Yeah.
Because you're not necessarily trading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you collect them, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously a big an integral part of TCG/CCGs is it's normally two people fighting each other with a pre-assembled deck, right? Trying to reduce the enemy's health to zero in some way.
Not always, actually.
Well,
That's true.
Reduce your health to zero isn't a thing in all of them.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
a
lot of them is, and Gwent is a big one where it's not, but most of the other really popular ones is just
well, Gwent you accrue points, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to win rounds.
So
points.
you could honestly call that damage and just say it's the person who does more damage. Yeah. I don't really see the difference.
There is a difference because damage is in that game. Damage, you do damage by hitting other units on the board, and you don't really. That's the only way you deal damage. You just acquire points by getting big things.
Yeah.
Well, if you are dealing damage to other units and that's affecting their power, then wouldn't power also be wouldn't power translate to damage? And since you got all the you could use that as damage just in a different context.
Yeah, I suppose you could, but they don't call it damage for a reason.
It's more confusing.
It's similar.
I don't think classifying them all as being damage dealing is a healthy thing.
It's just a weird way to think about it. You just think about it as points. I don't know, whatever. It's just a different one than all the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, but usually you just play minions. They get some attack, or sometimes they get some defense.
Yeah, like Yu-Gi-Oh.
You hit you character who you're trying to reduce to zero, or you can trade you into other minions. That's the general flow.
And how attacking works is really definitive in these kind of games. For example, with Yu-Gi-Oh, you actually can't attack the enemy character unless there's no monsters in the board. Whereas in Hearthstone, or even in Struggle for Gara, what we're working on is unless there's a monster whose effect specifically inhibits you from attacking the enemy character, you can attack the enemy character no matter how many monsters are on the board.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Magic is a mess. Dave, you know more about Magic.
I'll vouch for Magic. Magic's a great game.
Nice.
So what makes
the complexity, the amount of different mechanics that you can play around with. It's not one noted in any way, actually.
Complex though.
It could be, but the thing is, the way that I see, I think the paper version is more overly complex. You can play any card you want, that's necessarily. But on the online version, there's different rotations, So they try to make it not too overwhelming, the different types of abilities. But I can see that though.
Yeah.
I just mean like upfront Magic feels really complex.
Well, I think it feels complex from personal experience. I was in the Magic scene for a while, and it feels complex at first just because of the amount of, not necessarily power you are given, but the amount of choices you are given. Like, for example, do I want to attack with this monster or and tap them, risking getting attacked? Or do I want to hold off for now so this monster can defend me if my opponent decides to get aggressive next turn? You know,
Yeah, I think that's
one of
good,
the many
though.
choices.
It allows you to have great choices.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Magic.
It leads to choices, but it also feels a little overwhelming because it's like, look at all these extra choices I have to make right up front.
Yeah, that's true. The entry barrier is kind of high for Magic.
And mana also feels really complex. I don't think it is, but it feels complex.
Well, I don't know. Like,
it's
mana
not
is not
complex.
complex things in Magic.
That's the one thing that their downfall, though.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
I don't know.
Mana sucks.
I feel like,
Lands are terrible.
Mana is complex, but not in the way that it's presented, in my opinion, because mana's complexity lies in the deck building rather than actually being in the game.
Yeah.
You got all that stuff where it's like, what's the balance that you need to strike? Because Magic is one of those games where you can just screw yourself over if you don't build your deck correctly.
But I'm sure there's like a best number of mana that like people.
Yeah, there is. There's a standard.
Yeah, it's like 35% of your deck or something.
Well, it depends actually.
Complex until you figure out the right number, and then it's just simply you just put the same number in almost every time.
Like usually, if you want to do a really aggro deck, you usually run less lands because you want little, like low cost guys. But
more little guys.
Yeah, but the thing about lands, I think it kind of draws into land. But the fact that you can like combine all of these different types of factions with Magic, you can like make a red, blue, green deck. That gives a lot of complexity to the game.
It also leads you to get mana screwed really easily.
Yeah, so you have to spend all your money on these rare cards that are dual lands, which they're called.
It's just not drawing those few lands at the beginning of the game is the worst feeling ever. Like, I understand that you can get screwed by a bad draw in other games, but it's really, really bad.
It's worse in Magic, in my opinion.
Also, you can draw all lands at the beginning, which has actually happened to me in the past.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's good at deck building. I went 50-50 on lands and monsters, and then I just got really unlucky.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, it was not pretty.
I think that the mana thing is like, it seems confusing and like complex when you're first getting into it, but then you realize it's just like whatever. I'll just put in the same number.
Well, but that's I think that's the same for any game, that like something that seems complex initially isn't complex.
Yeah.
I'm just saying for beginners it feels a little overwhelming.
Yeah. Like all the different, especially like
because
the cards, the physical cards, you know.
When I was a beginner, I just didn't know the ratio, and I might not have won a game of Magic for about 2 months unless I was fighting another person even newer than I was. You know, because it was just inaccessible for me for about 2 months because I just didn't know. Well, I was like 10.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think Magic was really designed for 10-year-olds.
Yeah, it really wasn't. I just built an artifact deck and hoped that I could, like, surprise people.
The game does get fun, though, the fact that it's hard for it to get old sometimes. Because there's so many different things you...
Yeah, that's, it's kind of similar with how Yu-Gi-Oh! Works. Like,
do you think more so than other games?
For Yu-Gi-Oh?
No, Magic.
What do you mean? Doesn't get old?
Yeah. Do you think it gets less? Do you think it's more fresh?
I don't think it's more fresh, but I think it.
Do you feel like you run out of decks less fast in Magic?
Yeah, I do, because you can combine colors. You know.
Yeah.
That's fair.
There's always like a million different things you can do with the cards you have.
There's so many. From what I've seen, there are so many decks in Magic that. You know, like there's a lot of possibilities just because of how, I don't know how to articulate it actually, so I'm not go for that. But you know, it's like it just seems like there's a lot of possibilities that are balanced just because of the nature of the game being like drawing into lands and like how it limits you from scaling a lot.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we're gonna talk about like getting like mana being weird, Like, let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Yu-Gi-Oh's scaling is so weird.
Let me take the floor real quick. So, let me tell you a little bit about how Yu-Gi-Oh works. All right, and by a little bit, I do mean a little bit because I will break your mind. So, basically, in Yu-Gi-Oh, if you build your deck correctly, you can play it all in one turn. I just wanted you to know that, everyone. There's something going on in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh right now where a lot of games are ending on turn 1 or 2 just based on how the players draw. And there are quite a few games that are decided by the rock, paper, scissors at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, haven't people been playing OTK decks for like a decade, though?
Yeah, I used to play an OTK. I used this card that was, after 20 turns, win the game. And then I used a combo that artificially passed turns in after playing that card. And
okay.
I had about like a 55% consistency rate with that combo. Best part was I didn't have to attack my enemy, so I could just do it before their first turn even began sometimes. So that existed. So Yu-Gi-Oh's broken.
Okay, I understand that. Let's just talk about the scaling in Yu-Gi-Oh. Like hypothetically, if you couldn't just straight up win the game on the first turn.
Yeah.
Like,
well, if you want to
let's just talk about like the sacrifices as opposed to having mana.
Yeah, sacrifices is an interesting mechanic.
Because it's just weird. Like, I mean, it's interesting that you can use that they don't have any outside resource, that you have to use your monsters as a resource instead of like mana.
Yeah, a lot of resources.
The problem is that spells are just free. Like,
over time, they've created stronger monsters and weaker spells. But the issue with that is that in the competitive scene of Yu-Gi-Oh now, they're sacrificing your monsters is called tributing. And there is basically no tributing going on because it's so slow in comparison to special summoning. By the way, special summoning works on a similar scale of spells. If you have a monster that's effect allows you to special summon something, there is no limit to how many special summons you have per turn. So people opt, instead of normal summoning or tribute summoning, they will just special summon out their combos.
Can you explain what the summoning with different types of... I'm not really a Yu-Gi-Oh guy.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I may have skipped over that. Yeah. So basically, in Yu-Gi-Oh, monsters have stars, alright? And if you get one normal summon per turn. And a normal summon can be putting down a monster between 1 and 4 stars, tributing one monster to summon a monster with 5 or 6.
Wait, tributing like a monster?
Yeah, tributing a monster on the board to summon a monster of 5 or 6 stars, or tributing 2 monsters to summon a monster of 7 or higher stars. Tributing is when you send a monster from your board to the graveyard. And but the problem with tributing, why it's so slow, is a lot of the time, unless you have special summon combos prepared, you have to normal summon a monster, then wait a turn, and then tribute that monster. And tribute cards are just dead cards in your hand.
Because you only get one normal summon per turn?
Yes.
Right.
But I mean, that's kind of how people played Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, when it first came out.
Yeah, but it absolutely is. Back in the day, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was just a game of who had the higher attack, and tributing would just get you there fast. But over time, they added more support, and as it got out of hand, games got faster, and tributing, which was one of the initial pulls to Yu-Gi-Oh!, just became obsolete, which is an issue.
That just sounds more interesting, honestly. Like, the whole idea of having to, like, tribute to get big guys, but it's slow, so then you have to, like, balance speed. And
a lot of people romanticize the Yu-Gi-Oh! Era of around 2008 to 2011, because that was right around where tributing and special summoning had a balance that made them feel about as effective as each other.
Right, yeah.
So a lot of people like play certain formats that only allow them to like use those kind of cards. And that's kind of interesting to watch because even though the card pool is smaller, you see a lot more variety in the kind of decks that are made, because even though Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a ridiculous amount of cards, there are only a few decks or styles of decks that are actually any good. Like, for example, there's one card right now going around. It's called Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, I think. And this card is worth $43, and everyone just runs 3 copies of it in every deck, no matter what, because it's just that powerful.
Wow.
So you get a lot of that stuff, and current cards just have full reign and usability over the meta. Because they break the resource system.
Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring.
Yeah. What the card does...
turn, when a card or effect is activated that includes any of these effects, you can escape that effect.
Yeah.
So just, like, counter whatever.
So that's crazy.
It's free out of hand. There's a card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Called Solemn Judgment, which is a trap card. You can play it during your opponent's turn. And what it does is you negate the activation of a card and destroy it at the cost of half of your life points. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring.
That card,
like, free. Yeah, it's that card, but free, and it doesn't have to be on the board to first be activated.
Yeah.
Which is... And on top of that, it also does technically have the usability of being a monster that you can play if you need it.
Right.
Yes, so that card is ridiculous. And you've got a lot of cards like that floating around the meta right now that just break the resource system and allow players to play not by the game's rules.
So is Yu-Gi-Oh! Dead?
The initial
or is it
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Dying?
Here's how I view it. The initial iteration of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is dead. The Yu-Gi-Oh! We knew, like, pre-2011.
Does it have, like, a niche following?
Yeah, it has a niche following, but what you see more so now is that people would rather be breaking the rules of the game and seeing what they can do with that. Whereas you got a game like Hearthstone, though. And games like Hearthstone, even though they get a little crazier over time, like, they do still follow a strict resource system, and the devs are very conscious about making sure that those resources never really get out of line.
Yeah. Like, I think that the gain 1 per turn is a pretty good system that there's no random elements.
Well, it's very balanced.
Yeah, exactly. It's just balanced.
I think the unbalanced element of Hearthstone is the fact that you can directly attack your opponent.
That's true.
Because it makes it so that the charge mechanic is completely broken.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where they've nerfed the living hell out of every single charge monster, and there's they like had to remove charge from the game basically, or they had to come out with like an entirely new mechanic just so that they could have the like charge trade without having OTK decks be the best thing.
The mechanic is called Rush, I believe, correct?
Yeah, Rush.
You can attack the minions in the first turn that you play.
Yeah, that came out about this time last year.
And it makes really big guys a lot scarier. Like in guys aren't necessarily the best thing ever.
It's true.
Because they aren't always going to hit your opponent. You just spent a ton
blocking's a thing.
Right, you just spent a ton on a really big guy, and he's going to do nothing basically other than kill one little guy every turn.
Unless he has like trample, but you know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
But in Hearthstone you get one really big guy, and unless they kill it immediately, like you're just going to smack them in the face over and over again and win the game.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting. Because they're
And
very similar, but that is very, very different.
Yeah, and another thing that makes attacking so effective in Hearthstone is the fact that health and attack disjointed from each. So unless you can hit a guy all you want, but unless you're killing him, he's still dealing that damage to you every turn, and you're not really going to negate any of that.
Right.
And while that is a thing in Magic, having so much more power in the attacker in Hearthstone is an issue with that kind of mechanic.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because you can't really stop it.
So let's talk about non deck building games where you don't necessarily have to own cards. Or no, it is I mean deck building games. Games where everyone starts with the same cards.
Or like the same resources and whatever.
Right, the same resources, and it's like instead of building, maybe you build a deck while you're playing. I'm thinking of Dominion, and I'm thinking of
Spire.
Like Slay the Spire for a digital game. Ascension. I think is another game. No, it's not called Ascension. What's it called?
I have no idea. I've never played these games.
There's like a Harry Potter.
Neither have I.
Well, okay, but
Slay the Spire. I'm thinking of a lot of Slay the Spire.
I'm thinking of deck building games, which I think are super interesting because you can have a lot of the same mechanics, but the balance of the game totally changes when everyone gets to play with the same cards.
Right.
You're not.
So is this kind of like Arena?
It's kind of like Arena, but more like imagine like after every game you got to.
Oh
yeah.
Or with the example of Dominion, which is the first deck building game, every time you buy a card, every turn you get the opportunity to buy a card, and when you do that, it gets added to your deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then at the end of every turn you discard your hand and draw a new hand.
So it means means that essentially the way and the only thing that changes in between games is that you get a different common card pool to play with.
Yeah.
So Dominion, it means.
So yeah, everyone is playing the same cards that they can buy from. So it's just like completely strategy and spending your resources and buying the right cards.
Yeah, we should play Dominion sometime. It's a great game and it's really interesting.
Yeah, but I actually didn't know it was that similar to Slay the Spire, and honestly, I didn't really have a word for the genre of that kind of game, but I did find it very enjoyable at the time that I played it.
It's super interesting because you're building your strategy as you play rather than
one of the main differences between like deck building games and then like trading card games is like by definition they're balanced because everyone starts with the same stuff and everyone has the same exact resources.
Although sometimes it feels bad to have one card just be the best and only be buying that card.
That's true. So everyone's like rushing to buy that one card.
But it's not like the person who's playing Priest is always going to win the game in a deck builder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although there is that. What is it? There's that game. There's that game that Hearthstone players trying to make that hasn't out yet. The Bazaar. The Bazaar.
Yeah.
That had Reynad. That has classes. So it could be that that's unbalanced by class.
Yeah. When you add classes in, things are a lot harder to balance, even in that kind of context, because you have to keep in mind that at that point you've hit a point where not every player has access to the same cards, and you need to make sure that every player's card pool puts them on exact equal ground with each other, or people are just going to want to play the same class every time, and then there's no variety in the game.
I will say, I think the most interesting part of deck builders, though, is that you kind of inherently have to have all of the possible cards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like you are in a trading card game.
Yeah. Everyone, like,
Right. If I own Dominion, and we're playing Dominion, and you're not going to show up with your shiny $42 secret rare crap that's just going to win you every single game.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
like Black Lotus in Magic, right? That card's ridiculous.
Right. So so I mean, like, you lose the you lose that like exclusivity that you get from playing TCGs, which I think a lot of people love.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you get balance.
Yeah. See, the thing about that exclusivity in TCG is that it just creates walls between players. Like, there are some occasions where even though players may be of equal skill level with each other, just different financial standings or even like levels of commitment to the game are just going to inherently skew the matchups to like an 80-20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have to consider though is like playing a game should make you win.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
but sometimes
but if you don't have the cards,
exactly.
you're never gonna win anyways.
But like in a deck building game, if you play a lot and you know Bucklan to beat someone every time who doesn't know the strategies.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't feel as bad because they aren't gonna like whip out their shiny rare card.
Instead of like he played skill based. Instead of like he played whatever card. It's more like the Charizard card. Instead of that, it's like he just used his resources better than I did.
Yeah, he knew the game better than I did, and that was like you reach that point where it's a fault of the player instead of a fault of the player's wallet.
Yeah. Although I think one difference between deck building and TCG is that TCGs are much more competitive.
That's true.
I agree with that.
Because people love to come up with like their fancy deck.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I can agree.
And then they fight with their fancy decks. A deck building game is sort of thing that you'll like sit around the couch and play.
Yeah, it's a much more casual experience, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely a place for.
But I think the genres aren't necessarily direct competitors.
That's true.
I mean, similar people will play both, but I think like if you're a board game or whatever lover, you're probably going to own both.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a time where I'm like, I want to play a card game and I don't really care what I play. It's more like I want to play either a TCG or a deck building. It feels like two different things in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, and you can come up with like expansions for deck building games, but you're never really going to do packs.
Yeah,
which I think is interesting.
I like the packs though. Packs are fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Packs are their own can of worms though, and it creates that exclusivity thing.
Yeah, but the thing about packs is it's different than just buying cards online, which is something that is like a big thing in TCGs. Like, if you heard out of like, let's say I ordered Blue Eyes White Dragon online, and I got it, and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool, but like, I ordered this card. Whereas if I go and open a pack, and Blue Eyes White Dragon is just sitting, I'm like, whoa, I just discovered this guy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely there's like a wonder-like feeling that you get when you open something in a pack, and that's not really like mimicked by any other kind of experience.
It's called gambling.
True. But like, here's the thing.
That's true.
Here's the thing with packs, though. The packs are like a lot of TCGs do, and there's two alternatives to packs, which is buying individual cards or just like giving everyone every card, I guess. Or it's like the big alternatives, other than like trading, I guess. But like the thing with buying cards and packs is that you're spending money or resources on cards in general, you know. And the thing with packs is that you're spending resources on like random cards that like you don't even know if they're going to be the cards you want. So a lot of times it's cool to open like a cool legendary or something, but a lot of times it just feels like you're grinding and hoping to get something.
Right, the one card that you want.
It's true. That's why those online card games need an alternate way of getting cards.
Yeah,
because if it just were packs, that'd be terrible.
Yeah, I think the dust is something that Hearthstone does well.
I agree, but it also makes I like the dust in Hearthstone. What I don't like is that the only way to obtain cards is packs at all. You can, like initially with your gold. No, with your gold, but like what it ends up feeling like is if I have enough gold for a pack, a lot of the time in Hearthstone, I'm like, I'm probably not getting anything from this pack, but like, let me get that free dust, you know, because that's the minimum amount you'll get from a pack. And if I'm grinding towards something, it's not that I'm actually excited about the pack. It's just I'm excited about the resources the pack is guaranteed to give me.
Right. Yeah. Although after a certain point, like I think you're kind of just opening packs to get the dust that you can get. Like
exactly,
especially if you're a competitive player, you don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
All you care about is having that deck, you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. You just hit that like you're opening packs for dust, and then there is just no like opening packs isn't exciting at that point, you know.
Does it need to be exciting?
Well, I feel like there's
helps if it's not exciting. Yeah. Like the point of packs is to feel exciting. That's like one of the big upsides. It's like, oh, I just opened up a cool guy. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
And versus just like I don't know, you could get resources like instead of in Hearthstone, for instance, you buy packs with gold and then those turn into dust. Why not just get dust for wins or whatever?
I still get a little excited when I open packs.
Yeah, because that's true. There's always this like the little what if I get a legendary or a golden legendary?
Well, here's the thing about packs though. I think as the digital card games are starting to get more popular, packs are starting to be less necessary. Like the main reason packs are a thing in Magic, people to do a format called draft, where they open packs with friends and they build a deck out of those packs that they open.
Is that the main reason, or is that a contrived format that people came up with from the packs? I feel like it's the second one.
Well, the thing is like no one uses packs to get cards they want in Magic into the paper format.
Well, if they're competitive players, yeah.
No, like, I mean, you could try to make a deck with whatever, but I mean, it's the fact is like it's extremely hard to get the card that you're looking for in a pack and to get multiple copies of it. So you would have to buy an insane number of packs to build the deck that you want when you can just buy it for the the cards on the market.
Yeah, and like that's one thing. I played, what was it? It was this app a while back, and this game handled packs in the worst way I have ever seen. It essentially did this where you could open cards from packs, but not only could you not get rid of these cards, you also could never buy cards individually in any way. So
the only way to get cards is packs.
Yeah, but check this out, all right?
Okay.
In each pack, you were given like a box. Like you opened packs out of like a digital box, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this box, it was listed like what is in this box, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there weren't multiple copies of any one card in the box. So what you would do, if you wanted 3 copies of a card, which is standard in Yu-Gi-Oh, you keep opening packs until you get that card, and then you manually reset the box and fish for that card 2 more times. So even if I wanted to add like 1 slot of 3 cards into my deck, it might take me like 2 weeks.
Dang.
And there's no work.
How do you feel about opening a pack in like Magic and then having that and then having the cards you got out of that pack be like suddenly obsolete a year later because they rotated out?
Yeah, that does suck. That's why. I mean, it's different when you have like when you're doing it on the digital version, but
I mean, it's like it's a thing in Hearthstone too. It feels a little better
rotation
because you get to like dust your cards.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't do that in Magic on Arena,
but it's still a net loss, and it feels really bad. Like it feels like they're forcing you to continue to spend money when you already know.
I get really excited when the rotation happens in Hearthstone because I get to disenchant all my cards and gain a whole bunch of dust and buy a whole bunch.
That's the thing.
So it feels good.
Doesn't do that.
It feels
Magic.
good. Yeah, exactly. You can't sell your cards. Well, no one's gonna want your copy.
Except you're already going to be spending a ton of money for the next expansion. That's what I'm saying. It just feels like I'm being forced to spend more money.
I think it gives you pretty much a free next expansion. Like I got 1 million dust from disenchanting on my previous stuff.
Yeah, and then the expansion after that, you'll get 500,000 dust.
Yeah.
Like the dust will always decrease. You're always losing.
Yeah.
But you're also building up cards in the process.
Yeah, you are. So
if you keep up the process, you're generally going around net even throughout the expansions, but it still feels bad knowing, like, for example, let's say I wanted to make a deck that was like, oh, it needs this card, but like standard rotation is almost over and this card's just going to be obsolete. So if I saved up and got this card, I'm just not going to be able to use it for more than like a month and a half. And there's a certain level of impermanence that comes with that. Like, decks will only even be possible for a certain amount of time before they are just only wild.
How long average does it take for a card to rotate out in Hearthstone?
2 years.
It's like 2 years, yeah.
So I mean, you're buying a card, or you're getting packs for these cards, and it'll last you 2 years. So
the thing is, it's like not every card will last 2 years. Some last like a year and a half. Some last like 2.5. It's basically.
What do you mean by that? So they're not good.
All the cards that all the expansions that come out in, like, let's just say 2019 will rotate out. When
So if a card was released in April and a card was released in December, you are going to have.
At the same time.
They're released in different times.
Yeah,
they release sets of expansions, but then they rotate out like a certain number of expansions at the same time.
Yeah.
So it means you'll have one expansion that lasts like a year and a half, but one expansion that lasts 2 years.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
And I'm not a fan of it, to be honest.
What would you think is like the ideal thing to do then with these cards? Like
faster rotations.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
like you add a set, you rotate out a set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What about like the dust though? The cards you spend money on.
You get to dust those for whatever normal value.
For full price. For nerf price.
Huh?
Full crafting price, you mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I necessarily.
I mean, they would never do that.
Full distance. Yeah, I mean, that would be nice, but they're never gonna do that.
Because
but like that's what I wish.
Gotta figure, like, when you're getting rid of those cards, you still you likely got at least some use out of them. So it's like you're kind of like getting the cards, using them, and then giving them back at full price, and your resources, instead of going even, are just building up over time.
Whereas yeah, but you still have like those cards you got from the Evergreen set, like the original cards.
Yeah.
That then like then you have those and it feels great to have those, but they costed you exactly the same as a card from the fancy new expansion that's going to rotate out.
Yeah.
It's just weird. It doesn't feel good.
That's true.
I suppose so.
Especially like when like cards rotate out after 2 years, and like after like a year and a half, you start like, I'm not gonna buy cards from the old expansions because they're just gonna rotate out. Like that's the mentality it feels like, and that doesn't feel good. You know,
unless you play like Legacy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think maybe the solution would be something along the lines of, when a card goes out of rotation, you can dust it for like double its normal disenchant value. That's still not the full crafting value. It's just increased value because you're effectively using the card anyway.
I guess.
There's definitely a balance to be had there, but it is really delicate.
Yeah. The thing is, standard rotation has to exist though.
Yeah.
Like look at like Magic, or like there's so many cards, you know?
Yeah.
Well, like, that game's also been going on for like 25 years.
Yeah, but like that's why it has to exist. You know?
Yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't do standard rotation. Instead of doing standard rotation, they just have a ban list, which feels really bad. Because whenever you create a deck, you have to look through the list and make sure that none of your cards are banned.
How long is the ban list now?
Oh my god. It's like, the thing about the ban list is there are 2 formats of Yu-Gi-Oh! And each card is like a different number, like, that you can run in each. Like, there are some cards that are like limited. You can only run 1 of this guy. Some are limited.
Yeah, that seems really annoying.
Yeah, so like you always have to be like on your toes, and in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, I think standard rotation would just be healthier.
Yeah, it's also just because they have like it's also they can't nerf cards.
Yeah, that is a problem.
I think that's like the real biggest issue with physical card games is that you can't test as fast. Mm-hmm. So you wind up coming out with these horribly unbalanced cards.
Yeah.
And then you wind up having to ban them.
Like, can you imagine if we had released SFG as its old form to the public?
Yeah, exactly. We thought things were balanced, and they were not balanced.
They were horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like even once we release our first version, like it's still probably not going to be perfectly balanced, and it's going to be amazing that we can like.
Yeah, we've basically reworked the game like 2 more times, and it's still not finally balanced yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because it just requires a lot of work, and when you get down to it, a lot of balancing for digital card games actually comes from the community when it's released. People realize what's overpowered. You know?
Yeah. And for those that don't know, SFG is the game that we're all making together. It's pretty
Struggle for Gera is the name of the game, acronym SFG.
Yeah, and the Fyurious podcast, Fyuri Studios, is the company that we're making the game with. So that's kind of the whole thing. The whole podcast is based around SMG. So I mean, we might have to do standard rotation in a few years, depending on.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not.
I think we have to avoid feature creep. I mean, sorry, not feature creep. We have to avoid.
Yeah, power creep is bad because
power creep is.
What does that mean?
Power creep is like over time cards get slightly. And the devs are like, yeah, this is okay. It's just 1 card. But then the problem is that they keep going a little bit until like new cards are just ridiculously strong compared to old cards.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Like in Yu-Gi-Oh, the old stat line was like, at one point there were like 4-star cards that had like 1200 effect, and now you're looking down like 1900 attack cards with a paragraph full of positive effect, and they're the exact same amount of stars.
For those who don't know, stat line is just like what you'd expect a card of a certain cost to be in terms of power level.
Yeah, it's in general, it's like a way to gauge the balance of each card in a numerical way as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, you kind of have to do power creep if you want every subsequent expansion to be used. But at the same, so like a standard rotation allows you to Exodia. A standard rotation allows you to throw away old cards, which means that you don't need power creep to make it so that people are playing the new cards.
Exactly. Like also like because you're losing like whatever niche cards when you're standard rotating out, you can add more niche cards in that like people can run, you know?
Too many niche cards lead to really stupid combos.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know why I just thought of this, but it's something I realized that I don't actually know. Does Gwent do expansions?
It's too new. Yeah, I mean, they just came out with their first expansion, so yes. To answer your question.
Do you think that's the kind of game that would want to do standard rotation eventually, or do you think they might be okay?
Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting is they totally changed their game. Like a couple, I don't know, what was it, like half a year ago?
Oh wow, I did not know.
The whole game, like even the board structure,
really,
like even how the game works is totally different.
Do people like it? Do people like the new?
I think people like it more now. It was pretty unbalanced.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me that there was a meta of people just folding their turn so that they could have more impressive next turn.
Well, that's the thing. That whole game is based off of card advantage. If you have an extra card than your opponent, then you pretty much win, because there's only like 2 rounds, and you have to use all of your cards in your hand, and you don't draw every turn. You only have the cards you start with.
Okay. Wait, so how big are the decks?
Oh shoot, it's pretty short. I think it's like 30 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, but you don't have a lot of stuff in your decks. Usually, what you want to like filter through your decks so you're drawing all the good cards.
Right.
You don't necessarily, and you're not necessarily drawing your entire deck every game.
Yeah, but some decks do.
I see.
Which makes like mill really scary, which was a thing in old Gwent.
Ooh.
Yeah.
If you draw your last card, do you lose?
I think so. Something like that. You lose some. I'm not sure if you directly lose, but you lose eventually.
I know in Yu-Gi-Oh! You lose instantly if you draw while you have no card in your deck.
Well, that's the same as Magic,
then you got,
right?
Yeah, but then you got where you're just taking damage.
I don't even know how it works in Gwent.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something to think about, because mill decks, although they're really fun to play, a lot of times they're just like not fun to play against.
Yeah.
But do you think that balances itself out, though? The fact that it's fun to play and not fun to play against makes it like even?
That's true. Yeah.
No.
I think it's fine. I don't know.
I don't know. It's hard because you want niche decks to be in your game, but if you have too many, people hate the freaking game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
No, wait. Will it though?
I think
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Okay, but wouldn't that make the game really fun to play? Like, if every deck isn't literally $100 to make, like if you can play a bunch of different decks, isn't that just really fun? Like every matchup is different, every game is.
I feel like it'll be very divisive, because you'll have people who will like that there are so many niche decks, and then you have people who won't because they want to be able to have a predictable game. I feel like you have to pick one for your game to be. Otherwise, your community will just be skewed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if you have like a bunch of different decks.
Yeah,
and like sometimes,
of course,
like what happens in Hearthstone is usually like 2 or 3 decks just end up being way better than the other, and everyone's playing those 3.
Yeah,
for like 4 months
in Magic too.
So like it's really hard to avoid that stuff. Well,
especially in a game like Hearthstone, where the balance is so finite and predictable.
Yeah. And so in terms of expansions, like you can add cool cards that, I don't know, maybe try to buff weak classes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the most fun games I have are when I'm playing against a pretty normal deck, and I'm like focusing on playing good core mechanics, like focusing on my tempo, focusing on mana efficiency.
Like when you're playing a game the way it's supposed to be played.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like you're playing it the right way. And then when you're playing against a meme deck, it's just not that much fun, The other guy's probably having fun, but it feels like the fun got sucked out of the game. It's just like, I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with that sometimes.
And it's like, this guy wins because he pulls his combo.
Right.
Yeah, like, remember Mekkx in Hearthstone?
Or Freeze Mage. Old Freeze Mage was...
Freeze Mage was terrifying.
Yeah.
They're basically the Hearthstone has passed that just feel like they're losing until they win. And that's a huge problem in a game like Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Because in Hearthstone, you don't even most decks don't even have the power to prevent it, you know, because there's just no way in such a balanced and predictable.
Yeah, until you have like that, and then there's that one deck that hard counters when you come up with meme decks. It just sucks.
Yeah, because it just becomes an unwinnable matchup.
But you need you need cool decks. You need cool decks, but at the same time, you need them to not be straight up memes.
Yeah, and
it's hard.
It is hard because you got to fashion all these different play styles and make sure that none of them are fundamentally broken into each other.
Right, because you don't want like an 80-20 matchup that just feels bad every time you hear.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also got to be thinking not about card games in terms of decks, but you got to be thinking in terms of cards.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where it gets difficult.
Like a played win rate versus like a drawn win rate of a card, played win rate of a card.
Because it's like, even though it's what you should be like trying to do, it's just impossible for devs to think more than their entire player base. Like, the player base will find a way to outsmart a dev at some.
Yeah, definitely. Like a card that they didn't know existed, or just like.
Yeah, you see that all the time with Magic. Just literal turns that take like 2 hours.
And Hearthstone.
Yeah. Like I don't think it feels like in Hearthstone, it feels like they never intend the best decks to be the best decks.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It depends on why something is the best deck, I think.
A lot of the time, the best decks in Hearthstone are either decks that have tempo that is good, or decks that can kind of dodge around the limits of the game, which are really rare and
Key block.
That's the same with Magic, in a sense. Mm-hmm. Right now, the best deck is just a control deck that's absolutely broken, and they don't know what to do about it. The deck's just full of destroy monster spells, board clears.
They just made too many of them.
They did. And the thing is, that the issue is you can mix colors. So basically, you run the 3 colors that have the most control-y options. And you make like the ultimate control deck and destroy everyone.
You just can't land anything on the board?
Dude, it sucks. You can't do anything.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Control decks feel really bad to play against in a lot of games.
If they're too strong, that's the thing. Like, if they're not too strong, it's cool, because it's like, oh, does he have his board clear? He could be baiting me to play a whole bunch of minions. Like, it's a cool, mind game thing. But if there's so many board clears, it doesn't matter. They're going to clear you anyways. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of control, what do you think of like the types of cards that just inhibit the enemy from necessarily like playing the game? So there's a card in Magic, for instance, that's like look at the opponent's hand and take out a card and discard it, which basically just inhibits the opponent from doing what they're trying to do.
Yeah, there's also a card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's just your opponent skips their next normal draw.
Yeah, I don't know. Cards like that feel...
For both players, in my opinion.
Like,
I just don't think it's healthy for the game.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Like, you could be...
Anti-fun cards.
Cool card in your hand, yeah.
It's not that it's just anti-fun. It's like you have a whole plan, and then they just take that away from you. It's like...
Yeah, I think counter cards are kind of anti-fun.
But I also think that they kind of, like, a few of them at least have to exist.
What do you mean by counter cards?
As in, like something that makes it so that, like, say you're looking at your hand, you're like, oh, look at my sick combo, dude.
Yeah.
And then you're, like, getting all ready to play your sick combo, and then something happens that just completely ruins it.
Yeah.
And I'm not what your combo is.
I'm not talking about like them killing your board, because that's the way you'd expect them to.
Yeah.
Like playing through the normal route, but like maybe they like in Yu-Gi-Oh, maybe they play like a trap card that.
Yeah. In Yu-Gi-Oh, there's a trap card that's just when your opponent attacks you, destroy all of their attack position monsters.
Right.
Which
and
is
it's just like
normally all of them.
Right. It's just like that's not fun, you know.
Yeah.
Or just like
it really isn't.
Trap cards are very anti-fun.
In Hearthstone, there's a card that's just like bring out a card from your opponent's hand and put it on the board. Like
that's a dirty route, right?
Yep. Exactly.
I love that guy.
It's just like the only reason that card was good was because sometimes it would take comic pieces out of their hand, but sometimes it would just bring out a big minion and you'd lose the game.
Yeah.
And there was also times where you could play it for free because your opponent had no cards in their hand.
Exactly.
Or had no
It's so bricky. Like sometimes it just wins the game. Sometimes it just loses the game. It feels bad for both parties.
It kind of bypassed the flow of the game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That card was a weird anomaly in Hearthstone just because it was allowed to happen for so long.
So I think like creating extra ways to interact with your opponent's stuff just doesn't really feel that great most of the time. I think it has to exist in some form or another.
It's really tempting for designers as well.
But it can't be common, and it can't be and it can't be and it can't be good, honestly.
Yeah, there was one mechanic that we were actually playing around with for a while in the development of SFG. Dyno and Mekkx probably remember this really well. One of our drafts of pirates, their whole mechanic was they steal your opponent's stuff, but they're below stat. And every game just ended up feeling like nobody could do anything, and it just grinded to a halt. And no one
not even the pirates could do anything to really
because none of their cards synergize.
Yeah. It was just making the game not fun.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you oversupport that kind of playstyle.
So what have we found is fun?
What have we found in our game?
What have we found that is actively fun?
Well, I mean, just our base mechanics and how they're different from other card games.
We
should just talk about it for just go over our mechanics.
But just as a precursor, our game, when played the way it is intended to be played, feels fun.
Yeah, I agree. We should try to avoid weird cards that change that.
Yeah. So, should we go over some basics of our game actually?
Well, the thing is that could also make the game stale.
That's true.
If we're just doing the same thing over.
That's true. We would have to change it up.
It's really hard design wise. I think what you have to do is you have to keep coming up with interesting new mechanics that aren't too complicated.
Yeah.
But you got to make sure that those mechanics aren't fundamentally broken is the thing. Remember when Hearthstone released Baku the Moon Eater and Gen Greymane, they were like, look at these cool new mechanics. And those cards were just auto-run in every single deck for a year.
Every top-tier deck was just
They had to prematurely knock them out of standard rotation because they were so toxic.
I mean, I think they were really interesting.
They were.
And cards like... I think Reno Jackson is my favorite design-wise card ever.
It's interesting, but it's just like a lot of the times the best decks are you're forced to run those cards that inhibit deck building.
But I think it's really interesting if you have a card where you're not. If you want to run it, you have to build your deck around.
Correct.
I think that's really interesting.
The one thing
really quickly, the difference between Gen and Baku and then Reno was that you had to run Gen and Baku if you want to play top tier.
Yeah. Whereas Reno was optional. But the thing about Gen and Baku was why they were broken was there were a lot of decks that just didn't have to change much to accommodate them.
Yeah.
It really didn't inhibit them because options that they had otherwise were almost just as viable. Whereas when you were playing Reno, you had to play with half as many cards as you normally had because no duplicates in your deck. Whereas in a lot of Hearthstone decks, you run 2 of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But Ben and Gaku, Gen and Baku, you in some circumstances barely change anything. Face Hunter barely had to give anything up.
So
I mean, yeah.
So in SFG, how are we going about?
Well, I mean, we come up with new expansions, so it's
but I mean, we're in terms of I mean more trying to make it so that people have to. If they want to play, it means they have to make interesting deck building choices that don't feel bad.
Well, yeah, one of our design philosophies is about cool deck building. We don't want to affect that in any bad way. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's a little too early to say how we're preventing it because we don't have enough play testing. In general, one thing that we've been trying to avoid that made Gen and Baku so strong is effects that happen at the start of your game. We might have 1 or 2 of those, but they will be nowhere near as effectual as Gen and Baku were, because the thing with those is it was also a thing with Patches of the Pirate, a card that summoned himself from the deck when you played a different pirate. is those cards will be generating value without you having to drop in.
And they're so consistent, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
They also remove
Except when you draw
variety.
Yep.
So do you think secret weapons are a good way of fixing that?
And for those of you who don't know,
let's talk about it.
The way our game works essentially is there are 4 rarities of cards. There's commons, uncommons, legendaries, and secret weapons. And well, let me explain this first. Deck building is based around rarity. You can have 2 copies of each card game, but you can run as many commons as you want, but you can only run 10 total uncommons. You can only run 5 total legendaries, and you can only run 1 copy of each legendary additionally. And the final thing is a secret weapon is a card that's very powerful. You can only run 1 secret weapon in your entire deck.
Yep, it's kind of similar to how Gwent does it. But the thing is, you don't get to see the secret weapon that your opponent is playing in SFG. But in Gwent, you always get to see.
That's why it's secret.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
but the thing about secret weapons is they're not necessarily creating playstyles, or they're not necessarily like making something amazing. They're just ways to supplement what you're doing and make it even better. So it's not like Gen and Baku. Every single game was just like hero power every turn, or because it just buffed your hero power. But with the secret weapon, it's not just going to be super consistent. It's just going to highlight what you do best.
You can't create a playstyle around a secret weapon because drawing into them isn't consistent enough to be relied upon.
I feel like some people can, though.
That's true.
There are going to be times when people will do that, I think, depending on the secret weapon, because there are cards that help you tutor out your secret weapon.
Yeah, like Grumtree, for example. That card is just, his effect is when he drops on the board, you draw your secret weapon.
Yeah.
But still, you can only run 2 copies of him, and he's an uncommon, so he's going to knock down how many uncommons you can actually
it's definitely
use.
a nerf in your deck building, if you want to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think placing more limitations on deck building actually creates more interesting deck building?
A lot of times it does.
In my opinion, it doesn't necessarily create more interesting deck building, but it does create easier to balance deck.
Because it creates fewer decks.
There's 2 types of I think there's 2 types of like altering deck building. One is just like having certain cards that you can't add, and then there's like limiting how many cards you can add. And I think that like making certain cards that you can't add feels worse because that suggests a limit. But like just saying you can only have 10 uncommons. It feels like oh, which ones do I want? I could run Grumtree to draw my secret weapon. But then there's other ones that might have better tempo, stuff like that. I feel like there's like more nuance in that.
Yeah, I agree. And there's like a lot of like as you're saying, a lot of prioritization. You kind of got to figure out what's worth it for you in certain circumstances. But generally what we've seen is you want to run the maximum limit of secret weapons, legendaries, and uncommon you can, because as a blanket statement, those cards are normally more powerful or specialized than commons are.
Correct.
So you're going to want
legendaries and secret weapons.
Yeah. So it creates a more instead of creating a system where you just throw in whatever, kind of creates a system where you got to figure out what you want to throw into the slots you're provided.
Yeah.
Still playing around with if that's a good thing or a bad thing, though.
I think that it's cool. I don't know. It's something we have to definitely play more with.
Yeah, it is.
I think we should also talk about our token system, which is
that is probably one of the most significant things in our game gameplay wise is our resource system is very different from other games like Yu-Gi-Oh or Hearthstone.
It feels a lot closer to Yu-Gi-Oh because
it does.
You're not like increasing the amount of stuff you have,
Yeah, basically, our system is you have 2 types of tokens. You have monster tokens and you have action tokens. And actions are basically just spells, but so we've called them actions as a kind of like an all-encompassing word. And your monster tokens help you summon your monsters, and your action tokens help you summon your actions. So you can actually like save up some action tokens as you're dropping monsters, waiting for like a large action or vice versa. And the way tokens like token income works is you get 3 of each token every turn, with a maximum of 15 of each token. And but as opposed to a game like Hearthstone, where if you have 8 mana one turn and you spend that mana, next turn you have, because you go up 1 crystal and then all your mana refreshes. In SFG, you have income in a way. So like if I spend 12 tokens, it's not like I'm getting all 12 of those back next turn plus 3 more from my token game. I am getting 3 tokens next turn. I have spent those tokens.
Right.
Yes.
And that makes the flow of the game a lot like weirder, because like you could save up for some cool big stuff, or you can just play a 3-cost guy every single turn. So there's like a lot of decision making in terms of like especially deck building. Like how do you want to make your deck?
Yeah, you really have to think about like what your deck's objective is, because we've seen decks that play like really close to the curve in both monster and action tokens, spending pretty much all their stuff each turn. We've seen decks that do the opposite, basically saving up both and kind of just waiting for large combos. And we've seen decks that both save up action tokens while they drop to stall, and decks that drop actions to stall the board while they wait for the large monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of variety that goes into it.
Yeah. It's just like cool because it feels like no other card game has most similar to Magic, but they kind of screwed that over when they started doing.
Really, I think it's most similar to Hearthstone.
Yeah, Hearthstone, you get it all back every turn.
Well,
you also get Magic too.
Oh, I mean Yu-Gi-Oh. That's what I meant.
Honestly,
in terms of curve,
yeah.
I might not know enough to say this for sure.
Vanilla Yu-Gi-Oh,
but it kind of feels similar to Pokemon.
I've never played Pokemon.
I just collected them.
Yeah. I've watched someone play Pokemon once, right? and what it looks like is to me when I watched it, it seemed like people were playing cards. Their energy things. They were kind of like lands, but you spent them instead of them.
Right, you have to save your energy, so it is kind of like income. That's interesting.
Yeah. So
we just ripped off Pokemon. We didn't notice.
Maybe we should take a look at Pokemon just to see if we can get any design ideas.
Yeah. Well, their whole thing as well. They treat their energy like Magic treats their lands, which is you have to draw into it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So our game is different because your entire deck is able to be devoted to forming your strategy, while your tokens are sort of going in the background. You don't have to devote active attention to that.
Although you do want to be managing them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not like super complicated,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're gaining 3 and 3 each turn in most circumstances, unless you have some effect that changes that.
Yeah.
Should we talk a bit about how monsters and attack?
Sure. Yeah, that's slightly different.
Yeah. I'll be right back. Feel free to continue.
Yeah, in a lot of card games, there's something called summoning sickness, which is where monsters can't attack on the turn you play them. But like Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have that, and our game SFG doesn't have summoning sickness. So that thing is that gives a lot of power to the attacker. You can just summon down a monster and just hit him, and then you just hit him every turn. So what we did was, if you attack with a monster like this turn, you will not be able to attack with that monster next turn.
Yeah, it inhibits the power that they have, and it also allows more interesting thoughts. When you're playing, because you want to, if I want to attack now or if I want to save up and hit him later, because I know that I won't be able to attack the next turn.
Because you can decide, do I want to hit his face now, and you try to get him down to 0, or he can play a monster and I can trade into the monster. There's cool decision making there.
It makes trading more interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that I don't know how much you guys have been trying to design around this, but trying to avoid having too many really good monster buff mechanics, because the second you allow crap like Hearthstone's double monsters
Yeah.
Then you're going to wind up with OTK combos.
Yeah, we had that similar card, like in our first rendition of the game, and that deck was crazy. You got like one turn kill combos like every game.
Alright, I'm back.
Yeah, we want to avoid too many good boosts, but the thing is, like, the ability to attack the turn or summon also allows you to play a monster and trade immediately.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't really have engine monsters that, like, do stuff over time, or else they'll just be killed off, you know?
That's true.
Mm-hmm. That is an issue that we encountered a lot. Like, that engine monsters essentially just felt useless unless you gave them some kind of an on-target ability. Yeah. And then at that point, they may as well have just been an enchantment or a field spell.
Can you explain engine monsters?
Oh, yeah. So, an engine monster might be something like at the start of each turn. So just something that simple.
Another monster, something.
Yeah, or something.
You get value
like,
over
do something.
Or like, well, this guy boost all your other monsters by 1. You know, increase their power by 1.
You're saying slow cards don't feel that good.
Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah.
Like value generating.
Some monsters don't feel that good. You know.
Some monsters.
Just because how easy it is for them to die.
Yeah.
You know.
That's the other thing. Power makes it a lot easier for a monster to die.
Yes.
Right. Which is different than a lot of card games. You know, a lot of them have attack and health. Each monster has attack and health. And the attack doesn't usually change. But in our game, it's just one unit, and when your monster gets, like, the health gets lowered, the attack also gets lowered by the same amount.
Yeah. Kind of. And what that ends up doing is it makes each monster feel like both an offensive and defensive resource, and you need to choose which one you're using it as.
Yeah.
But it also means that like a really big guy is only going to be big for a little while.
Most of the time people are going to nuke him.
Right. And so if you play a really big guy, like,
he's pressured.
Like, maybe you take it to face, but then, like, you know you're not getting that much damage from him. The next, all your opponent has to do is pour a little bit of damage into him, and suddenly he doesn't deal that much damage.
Yeah. But in that process, they are losing resources, like some of their monsters, most likely. So they have to find an answer to it, just like any other game. Although we did a change rather recently that makes finding an answer less urgent, which is when a monster attacks, we
already talked about that.
Oh, okay.
While you're peeing or whatever.
Yeah. All right.
I think it's a good solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different, which is the most important part, I guess.
Yeah.
You don't want to be copying Summoning Sickness, because pretty much every card game does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though it does make control decks interesting in our game.
Yeah,
well, it means you like actions, right?
It means like
you can save your monsters from attacking to trade it into other monsters.
Generally, I've only seen 2 successful control decks. One of them used a broken mechanic, which was essentially a field spell that gave monsters summoning sickness, and the other, a lot of clear and a lot of healing.
Yeah.
Healing.
Where was that deck you played? Where it was just like you played a bunch of monsters, and your whole goal was just eliminating the enemy's monsters until you built up to.
Oh, that was deck ramping now, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like how control work, I imagine.
That was a very toxic deck, though.
What made it toxic?
Because it was supposed to be like a slow deck that ramped, but it ramped up really fast. So, like in the early game, it had the tools to slow down the opponent. But then it also had the tools to play overstated monsters and draw cards.
So this is how it slowed down the opponent, and at the same time, it was ramping to the late game by buffing the things in the deck.
The mechanic of the deck itself was that there were a lot of cards in the deck that boosted all the monsters in your hand and sometimes even your deck, out, so that when you were playing those monsters, they were inherently above stat line. But the problem with that was that there's no way to actually make those monsters that are getting boosted under stat line due to the nature of it being open-ended. So you are just playing the monsters over stat line consistently to a ridiculous degree because of how over-supported the mechanic was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The thing is, the cards didn't feel too strong themselves. It was just like how they worked with each other. I don't know. So we have to be careful about that.
Yeah, over-supporting archetypes has been well. And it also basically auto-creates the decks for you in some circumstances. I remember we had a lot of scenarios in the past where in our game there are 30 cards to a deck. And there were a lot of scenarios where there were just 26 cards that were auto-includes. And you got to play around with a whopping 4 slots in that deck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just I think that's just our fault because we were like, hey, this deck sounds cool, and then we designed 26 cards that would fit with that deck.
Yeah. I think Oceans were probably the worst defender of that.
You had to run all the Ocean cards.
Yeah, because of how they worked, they all boosted an intangible card that was summoned cards themselves, and that was a mess.
All right.
Yeah,
I think that's gonna be it. We're just gonna shout out our game and our website real quick. We are Fyuri. We are making Struggle for Gera. Visit us at FyuriStudios.com. Kickstarter coming soon.
Yeah. Absolutely. Look out for the trailer.
We got a lot of lore stuff going on, as well as the card game stuff. So it's a lot of cool stuff there.
Absolutely. And probably have some more podcasts in the future if anybody wants to listen to those, I'm guessing.
And we'll be posting this on our YouTube probably?
Yep.
I believe so.
So, thanks for listening.
Thank you, everyone.